good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you are. I've been asked to give quite a high-level view of what's happening in Singapore and how Singapore is fostering the development of the alternative protein industry. I'm going to talk to you about a few things. There we go. I'll give you a bit of a background in the Singapore context and what we're doing with respect to food security and our approach to increasing our self-reliance. I'll talk to you about one of the major initiatives, which is the Singapore Food Story, and some of the key institutes and programs that have been set up to address the challenge of Singapore's food security. I'll talk a bit about some of the regulation and supporting programs, which are very interesting to me. And then finally, I'll wrap it up by just describing the final piece of the puzzle, which is going to be the AgriFood Innovation Hub. Now, I want to be adding a bit more value than just giving you a description of all the different things that are going on. And I know some of you might be thinking of coming to Singapore or setting up business or finding out more. And I want to get you up to speed so you can hit the ground running when you go off that plane. Singapore loves TLAs. TLAs are three-letter acronyms. And we're even getting more fancy these days because more and more acronyms are 4 and 5 letters long. All of these acronyms you see in front of you at the moment are to do with the Singapore Food Security program and the 30 by 30 program. So if you hit the ground running and all of these, you're going to be really doing well. Now, just to keep you on your guard, there'll be a little test at the end, okay? Okay, let's give you some context here. You know, Singapore sometimes is described as the little red dot, and it was Dr. Habibie, the former president of Indonesia, who somewhat disparagingly called Singapore the little red dot. He later denied that he was saying it, trying to be nasty about Singapore, but whatever he was meaning, the term little red dot has stuck with Singapore, and we actually quite embraced it. So we're quite happy with calling ourselves a little red dot, and we are that little red dot right at the end of the Malaysian Peninsula. So very small. We're a city-state. We're only 730 square kilometers in size. We're 1 degree north of the equator and 104 degrees east. 104 degrees east is exactly where Changi Airport lies. We're a major trading hub. That's always been part of Singapore ever since it was colonized by the British, and perhaps even before that as well. We've got a population of about 5.8 million people, and that's gone down a bit probably during COVID with people leaving. Our GDP per capita is approximately $60,000 US, which is pretty high, but that's also declined about $5,000 in the last year or so. We're part of ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which represents the 5th largest economy in the world after the US, China, Japan, and Germany. Because of our size and the way Singapore has developed over the last 30, 40 years, there's little land for crop production. There's a little land for crop production, and food security is a challenge. It could be a challenge for us, and there's been more and more concern about this food security issue over the last 5 to 8 years or so. Now, our local agricultural production isn't that great. We only have about 1% of our land that is being used for agricultural production. We produce 528 million eggs, which is about 26% of our local consumption. 2 billion eggs a year is needed in Singapore, which is a pretty amazing number to me anyway. 14% of our leafy vegetables are produced in Singapore. Here I'm talking about mainly Asian leafy greens and some of the Western salads. We consume or produce only 4,600 tons of our fish consumption, which is 10% of the total. So we are really dependent on supplies from outside the country to provide food supply for us all. Now, we import food in various forms from over 170 different countries, which is pretty amazing, really. But you know, the number of air miles in that food is pretty scary. You know, I had some basil the other night with my pasta, and I was surprised to find that it was actually from Kenya. We hadn't got any Singapore basil in the store at that time, and we do produce our own basil, but the store was selling Kenyan basil. But Singapore is trying to diversify its food supply, so we're not reliant on one particular source. 170 now, but even so, that's pretty scary. And even during COVID, there was some disturbance of our supply chains, which really sort of focused the mind again. We're being encouraged, or people are being encouraged, to grow local, and companies are being developed to produce leafy greens and other vegetables and some fruit in Singapore. And the overall aim is to try to produce 30% of our nutritional needs by 2030. This is a so-called 30 by 30 program. And within that grow local are alternative proteins. So this is where, the alt protein companies are working in to try to assist with that 30 by 30 program. We're also trying to do contract growing overseas to help provide fruit and vegetables for us as well, and meat. Now, all of this is supported, all of this is called the Singapore Food Story, and the Singapore Food Story is supported by a very strong R&D program. And there are three themes to that R&D program. The first is sustainable urban food production. And here we're talking about mainly research into vertical farms for plant production and animal production, particularly fish. There's also research being funded on future foods. Again, that's where alt protein comes in. And there's also some interesting research being done on food safety science and innovation. And this also has relevance for anybody who's interested in future foods and alt proteins. Now, these programs are all coordinated by different agencies. Number one is coordinated by Singapore Food Authority, SFA. A-STAR, the Agency for Science, Technology and Research, coordinates the future foods research. And the Food Safety Science and Innovation Program is all managed by both SFA, A-STAR, and Nanyang Technological University, NTU. Now, theme two, just a bit more on this theme two that is relevant for the alt protein section, is the Singapore aims to be, or position itself as, a comprehensive research and development hub for alternative proteins, such as plant-based proteins, microbial proteins, and cultured meat. I'm really pretty excited by microbial proteins and cultured meat, because we can do that in Singapore if we're really clever, without needing imports of base products. But we can also import plant-based products, and we're doing a lot of research in that area. Now, the aim is to develop novel biotech-based methods for high-value, sustainable, and nutritious protein production, and also to develop processes of scale-up of alternative proteins. And we really also want to create new technologies that enable all this to be circular and sustainable. And all of this is really very, very relevant to all the alternative protein that we're looking at. The other theme that is particularly interesting, as I said, is theme three, and we're trying to boost Singapore's food safety branding and quality using evidence-based science to, ascertain emerging food safety risks, develop early warning programs and modeling systems for emerging pathogens. And this one is very important to my mind. There's research being stimulated on understanding consumer perception and social consideration of food innovations to improve their acceptability. And that, I think, is really quite valuable, because a lot of the time people are just assuming that we're going to be putting a product onto the market and everybody's just going to love it. And most innovations get pushed back. And I think that's very important, that we're trying to understand the minds of the consumer with this research. So what are the desired outcomes of all these efforts in this Singapore food story, and all the research is going to be supported? Well, obviously the first area or first target is increased food security. Our food security must be strengthened through all this research and these efforts that the government agencies are putting in place. We're also trying to create economic value for the growing agri-tech and food sector, and we want it to contribute to Singapore's economy and economic benefits for Singapore by developing this sector. Now, sometimes, the economic value capture side of the target gets quite a lot of focus, perhaps to the extent that the food security part of the equation is maybe not appreciated so much. But these are two very, very important desired outcomes. And if the third one is food safety, we want to be seen to be a globally respected and future-ready food safety system where we can produce safe food and also at the same time encourage international acceptance of Singapore developed food standards. Now, there are key government agencies supporting this 30 by 30 agenda: EDB, A*STAR, SFA, and ESG. If I could just expand on this for a little moment. EDB is the Economic Development Board, and it encourages and supports companies in the sector to come to Singapore, to establish a presence here. They're talking to all the big alternative protein companies around the world and seeing if there's a fit for them to come to Singapore and be part of the ecosystem here. Now, as you probably gathered, A*STAR, the Agency for Science, Technology and Research, supports the research and development agenda in the future food space. And it supports a number of institutes in the area, but its flagship institute is the Singapore Institute of Food Biotechnology Innovation. And I'll go on and talk a bit about that in a few moments, but that is called SIVB. It's one of the 5-letter acronyms. The third agency involved is the Singapore Food Agency, SFA, and it's the regulatory body, and it coordinates the overall Singapore food story. For those of you who may have been to Singapore before, it used to be called AVA, the Agri-Vet Authority, and then that was split up into the Singapore Food Agency and another agency that manages other issues. The fourth and very important agency that it plays a role in fostering the sector in Singapore is Enterprise Singapore, or ESG, and it focuses on the development of local companies. There's one group that I haven't mentioned on that earlier slide, and that's Temasek Holdings. Now, Temasek Holdings is an investment company that is very closely tied to the Singapore government. It is not a sovereign wealth fund. It functions as a company. But it has a lot of investments in the sector. Its overall portfolio in everything it does is approaching $380 billion, and it's invested significantly in the alt protein section and the future food sector. Obviously it's invested in Possible. It's got some investments in Growthwell, which is a chickpea protein company. It's invested into the Big Idea Ventures as well, the venture capital group. So it's spending a lot of money and investing a lot of money around the world in quite a number of different ventures of varying size. Let me talk a bit about some of the key institutes and programs that we have in Singapore. I mentioned the Singapore Institute of Food Biotechnology and Innovations, SIVB. Now, its priorities, it was established in 2020, and its priorities are to sustain scientific excellence in food, nutrition, ingredients, and industrial biotech, and build capabilities that support Singapore's sectors, the industry sectors. So, it's partners with industry, and a number of those partnerships are being developed at the moment. We want it's in science, technology, partnerships in science, technology, and innovation, and we're driving Singapore forward to become an Asian food innovation hub. Anybody who spends any time in Singapore will know that word hub is used a lot. And we want to be a hub in many, many different areas. And just this, and alternative proteins is one area. In food tech in general is definitely a focus. Another of the priorities in SIVB is to ensure that food health and well-being are enhanced through translational research into the products that are being developed. And there's a great group under the leadership of Professor Jayakumar Henry that does that work. And all of this is supporting this 30 by 30 national goal, and to hopefully also help the rest of the world in its quest for safe, healthier, and more sustainable food. The second program that I want to talk to you about is something that Temasek Holdings is supporting. And I talked to you about earlier how Temasek invests in companies. Well, it's increasingly becoming involved in helping and facilitating the development of the ecosystem itself. And it's established this Asian Sustainable Foods Platform, Asia Sustainable Foods Platform. And it was launched in late 21. Now it's trying to accelerate the growth of sustainable foods in Asia by supporting food tech companies from incubation to commercialization. And it's supported a number of programs so far. The A-Star Food Technology Innovation Center, which I'll talk about in a moment, and 2 joint ventures, one with Kramer, the German company, which will provide high moisture extrusion technology, and ADM, who will support the program with the provision of precision fermentation capacity. Those 2 technologies are areas where we know we need developing in Singapore. It is a relative weakness in Singapore, and I suspect in other places too, but Temasek is supporting the development of those sectors by partnering with Kramer and ADM. The other thing that Temasek is supporting, as I just mentioned, was this A-Star Food Tech Innovation Center. And it tends to be working a bit earlier in the developmental pathway of the invention to innovation pathway. And it's going to, with its $30 million budget, it's going to provide access to a food grade pilot plant facility for startup companies, and that'll have also extrusion and fermentation equipment. There'll be shared labs, test kitchens, co-working space, and access to A-Star's deep R&D know-how. This center will also host Next Gen Foods Tech Development Center. So the company that's brought to you Tyndall Products was going to do its early innovation work in this technology development center. The fourth program I want to talk about is another acronym. It's SAIL, Singapore AgriFood Innovation Lab, and that's housed at NTU, Nanyang Technological University, and it's a partnership of NTU with Enterprise Singapore, ESG. Now, it's also going to it aims to drive agri-food innovations by accelerating innovation in this space, and it will function as a national platform that seeds partnerships between sales corporate partners, and there's about 15 companies of varying sizes already signed on to this program with SAIL. It'll facilitate partnerships with smaller and medium-sized companies. It'll partner with startups and other research institutes around the island, IHLs. So very interesting. At least looking at it, it's probably going to be mostly focused on the food side of things, at least in the early days, because there's very, very strong expertise in the likes of Professor William Chen's lab at NTU in that area. Agri-food, then not agriculture itself or agri side of things is probably going to develop with time. They're primarily focusing at fintech for applications for the agri sector at the moment. The fourth program that I want, there's going to be a program I'm talking about here, is an Enterprise Singapore program. We talked all about the sort of R&D and facilitating research and the like. We're now switching over to supporting companies and fostering of the development of companies to scale. And Enterprise Singapore's got 2 programs here. It's got what they call a partnership with the venture capital funds, and this funding will invest in the alternative future foods and alt protein space. And there's 9 venture capital funds that is already partnered with. First 6 was Outfunder, Trendlines, Big Idea Ventures, Visred New Proteins, Innovate, 360, and ID Capital. And the final 3 have just been added at the end of last year, bring Cartesian, Emerald Tech Ventures, and Temasek Life Sciences Accelerator has been added as well. So they're investing in early stage companies. There's another program that ESG supports, largely in partnership with some of these venture capital funds. And there are probably 7 or 8 accelerators in Singapore in agri-food, but the ones that are focusing on alt protein are the Grow Agri-Food Tech Accelerator, and that's a partnership between AgFunder and Rocket Seeder of Australia. Innovate 360, Big Idea Ventures that has some Temasek money in it, and also the Israeli group Trendlines has an agri-food innovation center here, which is supported by ESG. Now, all of these accelerators run various programs, largely in the last year and a half in virtual mode, but in the early days before COVID, they were running their programs in-house and had people come to Singapore. They innovate, they accelerate Singapore companies as well as foreign companies. One company that I know quite well that has been accelerated here has been Future Fields, the Edmonton company that's working on growth factors for the cellular agriculture space. Let me just draw a line under that for a brief moment about talking about key institutions and programs. I just want to digress a minute because I want to just talk a bit about regulations, because there's a key programs in regulations that I want to talk to you about in a minute. But you'll have seen how Singapore approved for sale the first cellular agriculture product, the chicken product that was available in one of the restaurants here for a short while. That was very exciting that we were approving something from cellular agriculture at this stage was very, very exciting. Now, you know, the cynics are out there. We're going to probably saying that, oh yeah, well, Singapore's going to be producing an environment for a regulatory environment that's going to facilitate the production of these kind of products, aren't they? Because they're investing so heavily in it. But it wasn't. It was something that was very, very proactive, and I thought very, very clever. In that, in the early days of the discussions of the development of this sector, I know for a fact that there were documents discussing how we were going to regulate all of these new foods. It was a very, very proactive, some very, very proactive thinking from SFA to start developing this early. And so we're ready to go. And, you know, it starts to regulate this pacing problem that people talk about, where regulations lag behind the development of technology. And that is very, very exciting. And there's an initiative that has been set up called FRESH, which is the Future Ready Food Safety Hub, which again also addresses this pacing problem where technology is outpacing the development of policy. This Future Safety Hub, Future Ready Food Safety Hub, will have 4 pillars of operation. It's going to do R&D into technology for to ensure regulatory oversight of this sector. It's going to produce talent for regulatory work and to support regulatory efforts in this sector. It'll provide consultancy. It'll be a very interactive body with industry, so that it can work with companies to ensure that they adhere to guidelines that are for the regulation of the sector. And it's also going to be involved in risk communication around regulations, but also around acceptance of this technology by the general public. And I've been pleased to work with FRESH on what they're calling the Future Foods Communications Initiative, where we're talking about how we're going to understand the people who are going to hopefully buy our products. And it's very, very important. Finally, let me just talk about the AgriFood Innovation Park, or AFIP. This is it's an early stage project, and it has been hindered by COVID. It's not probably developing as fast as we would like, but that's only to be expected. But it's seen to be a pilot cluster to catalyze sustainable innovations in the Singapore's agri-tech ecosystem. Now, it's going to have a co-location of activities in urban agriculture, aquaculture, and novel food activities, plant-based alternative or cellular agriculture companies can be based in this future agri-tech area. Ultimately, it will be an agri-tech hub, but this is a pilot project where it's relatively small, going to be an AgriFood Innovation Park. And it's there to enable innovation and synergies across value chains between activities with adjacencies. We're looking to see, assistance for companies that go into this area to ensure that they can do things more sustainably. They can maybe manage their waste collectively. They can recycle collectively. All of this will help with costs and efficiencies for any company that will move to these to the AgriFood Innovation Park. This AFIP is only one small part of a massive agri-food initiative that will see most of the northwest of the island become an agri-food area. You can see on this map that I have there, there's an area called Sunoco. There's a food manufacturing zone there. In Lim Chu Kang, there's a new program being developed at the moment, which will create an agri-food area, integration of that farming area, so that is that grows produce in a more sustainable manner. There'll be fish products, fish production, animal fish, maybe some chickens, but certainly traditional agriculture, but done in a different way. Perhaps not so much vertical, but it'll be some normal or regular agricultural land, but it'll be much more efficient than it currently is. So that's going to be a massive undertaking, and the overall plan is talking about 2065. But we're targeting initially that's 2030 space, and let's get the alternative protein sector developed in the next 20 years or so. I'd be remiss not to mention a lot of the other groups that are working in this area in Singapore. I don't have enough time to be able to tell you all about them, but there's a great food science and technology department at National University of Singapore. There's large programs in food science and tech in NTU. Singapore Polytechnic does a lot of product development work. Nanyang Polytechnic does some work as well. All the other polytechnics, Republic, Nian Poly, and Temasek, all are very actively supporting the initiatives in alternative proteins. There's also at least two corporate technology centres. Givaudan and Beulah have established a protein research centre here, and ADM has also established an innovation centre. So it really is, coming together with a lot of different players all working together. And we are seeing people come together very nicely, and that will produce a very, very strong sector over the next few years. And it needs to be strong. It needs to be collaborative so that we can achieve that 30 by 30 goal. I hope in that very brief 25 minutes or so have covered some of the things that you might find useful. And if there's any questions that you might have, I'll be delighted to answer them